Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming to our presentation today. We'll probably give it about just 1 to 2 minutes to give everybody a chance to join, and we can go ahead and get started. While everybody is still joining in, I'll go ahead and point out a few things that I have to give you. You'll notice on the right side, there's actually some sections here where you can actually add some polling questions. If you have any questions going on throughout the webinar, please feel free to type them in during the presentation, and then we'll try to allot some time at the very end. We can go ahead and try to get to your questions and make sure we answer everything. Also want to make sure that you guys notice that we have an attachments and links section available. So the outline and the PDF for the presentation is available today. The outline will contain some of the web links that I'll talk about and you can actually use regarding any type of an upgrade from SQL 2008. We also want to point out that we have some links to some different websites that we have regarding some of the top SQL 2016 features that are available, white papers that are available for SQL Server 2017, and some other good resources that we have for you. So please take some time and download the attachments and click on the links and save those, because I know there's some good resources that you guys will need coming up in the future. So I can go ahead and get started here. Thank you for coming. I appreciate it. On behalf of DataVail, my name is Jeff Duncan. I'm one of the senior SQL DBAs for DataVail. A tiny bit about myself. I've got about 20 years experience working with SQL Server, and over the last 20 years, I tried to actually calculate it up. I've done approximately 1,000 SQL Server installs and upgrades, which sounds, when you try to enumerate it, it sounds a little bit unbelievable, but I'll admit to this. 375 of those were done at one time with a remote upgrade from SQL 6.5 years ago. So I'm still counting it, but anyway, that helps make up some of the 1,000 upgrades and installs that I've done. But hopefully we're able to put together some good information for you so that way you can make some good educated decisions to bring back to your businesses regarding if you need to upgrade from SQL 2008, or perhaps maybe you're just joining because you want to see something about some of the new features that are available in some of the newer versions of SQL Server. So we can go ahead and get started. Hopefully you can see the slides. If not, please put some your notes in there and someone will respond to you accordingly. Okay. First slide, okay, we do have an agenda for today, of course. So the first thing that we'll end up talking about is what are the reasons that we have that you need to upgrade from SQL 2008. And of course, there's dangers associated with staying with 2008, but there's great amounts of benefits with upgrading from 2008 to the newer versions of SQL Server. We're going to actually talk about both of those. We're going to try to help you choose the right version of SQL Server. And also, you need to choose which edition of SQL Server do you need to go to. We're going to talk about the Upgrade Advisor that's built into SQL 2012 and 2014, and then the newer Data Migration Assistant that's available in SQL 2016. And then last but not least, we're actually going to talk about some of the upgrade methods that you need to use to go from the older versions to the newer versions. Maybe it's just an in-place upgrade. Maybe it's a single server upgrade. Maybe you were able to get do a hardware upgrade and do a 2-server upgrade. But we're going to talk about some of those different methods to actually upgrade from the older version to the newest versions. All right, so I mentioned it briefly, but what are the dangers of not upgrading your SQL Server? Okay, of course, SQL 2008, we know now that it's reaching the end of its extended end of life. And so on July 9th, 2019, we're no longer going to have support from Microsoft for the product. So what does that mean? Well, number one, you're not going to get your security updates and hotfixes needed to keep the software up to speed. So that's a big piece of protection that's going to be gone. So no more security updates, no more hotfixes. If one of the latest scams or attacks comes out, this software will no longer be upgraded, and you put your business at risk. So there's a lot of security exploits out there. If you don't get the proper updates and hotfixes, you had to take the chance of getting your data stolen. One of the businesses I worked with in the past, they were lax about putting updates on their servers. They did get behind, and they were attacked with a hijack ransomware. And if they would have kept the hotfixes up to date, that would not have happened. So I don't want to see you get in the same boat as that customer that lapsed behind, and you don't want to put yourself in that situation for your business. Also, last but not least, you may fall out of compliance with industry regulations. So what does that mean? Maybe you're hosting a third-party application for your business on the server. When SQL 2008 is no longer supported, it's a high chance that third-party vendor may no longer support you as well, because you're not keeping up to the industry standards for their software. So you don't want to put yourself in that situation where you're no longer supported. That's, of course, like I said, I'm talking about the fears and dangers of upgrading and why you need to upgrade from 2008 because of the lack of support coming up. But I think that some of the main reasons you should upgrade from 2008 are actually the next slide, or the benefits that you'll actually have by upgrading, not just the fears. I know our businesses sometimes need to know what's going to happen to me if I don't upgrade. SQL 2008's been out for almost 10 full years, and it's been a very stable, very solid product. But that's going to change, and our businesses sometimes need to know some of the dangers and warnings so that way they can make proper decisions on what they need to do. But the next slide is probably the one I prefer because we want to talk about the benefits that you're going to get by upgrading from SQL 2008 to one of the newer versions of SQL Server. All right, so like I mentioned, I've been dealing with SQL Server for about 20 years now. And the first point under my benefits is the performance increases you're going to be able to get by upgrading to one of the newer versions of SQL Server. Okay, so 20 years ago, I was working with SQL 6.5. Back then, a 1 terabyte database was a rarity. It was something you heard about. Yes, this business, hey, they have a 1 terabyte database, and it was kind of a big deal back then. In order to maintain or take care of that 1 terabyte database, it required a lot of special attention, some special configurations, some manual or special maintenance. You couldn't just run the wizard and couldn't do regular backups and couldn't do regular index rebuilds because it would take forever. It would bring the system down. You couldn't access your data. So it required a lot of special work back then. Well, each version of SQL Server that's come out since then has become more and more robust, and the engines are designed to handle larger and more data and more complex databases. So each version that's come out has been that much better. So nowadays, a 1 terabyte database is commonplace. Just about every business out there seems to have at least a 1 terabyte database or more data that they have to have taken care of. Well, SQL Server, and especially SQL Server 2016, can handle that much better. The maintenance runs faster, backups run faster, and you don't have to be or take care of it as specialized or as specific as we did those years ago. 2008 was a great product when it came out. 2012, 14, and 16 are definitely designed to handle your larger data and be able to perform at a much higher level. All righty, point number 2, you can eliminate your weekend analytics loads. Okay, so this is a point, of course, it's going to make all your BI architects excited. Okay, so SQL 2016, you won't have to wait for weekends or after hours to run those analytical workloads, the big numbers crunching that you end up having to do, all your after hours and weekend processing to derive your data for your reports and for your analytics. Now it can run at the same time during your business day, during your transactions. So you ask, how does that actually occur? You can do those simultaneously now by using the in-memory OLTP table settings and also the in-memory column store, as well as in 2016 now, the real-time operational analytics. So in SQL 2012, we introduced in-memory column store. In 2014, we were introduced in-memory OLTP. And now in 2016, you have real-time operational analytics. You can actually have those number crunching processes running at the exact same time now as the transactions are occurring without hindering your production performance of your transactional databases. That's pretty amazing. Yes, it does require some work to get towards, but it's definitely a huge goal not to have those big downtime windows, after hours, weekend windows, where you could crunch all your data to be used during the business day. Now it can be done at the exact same time. All right, number 3, increased data security and increased encryption. All right, so in my warning tab that I had in the beginning, yes, we talked that you're not going to have your updates and hot fixes. So yes, of course, the new product is going to have all the updates and hot fixes that you need, but that's not what I'm talking about right here. SQL 2016 has new features inside it and new security models inside it that will actually greatly benefit you. So the first thing I want to talk about is a piece called Always Encrypted. So all of us have somewhere in our environment some type of sensitive data, and yes, we need to do something about it to make sure it stays safe. So those hackers that are out there, they try to get in, steal your data that's important to you or important to your business, and maybe you have social security numbers, maybe you have credit card numbers. Regardless of what it is, that sensitive data, what they end up doing, they try to figure out a point in your transaction where they bump in there and they sniff or they skim the packet and they try to actually steal it somewhere inside the transaction. So the end user, they put in their information, and after they hit go, somewhere along the stream is usually when it's stolen, and then they end up stealing that fresh data before it even gets a chance to get encrypted inside the database. All right, so now in SQL 2016, they've introduced what's called Always Encrypted, which means at the very beginning phase of the transaction, as soon as I type in my social security number, it's immediately encrypted. And so as soon as I hit go, as it transfers from my screen over to the database, it's already encrypted. So how do they manage this? It's actually done, it's like a handshake method between the SQL client and the back end and now external keys. So there's external keys that are used. The data is encrypted from the very beginning across the whole process of the transaction, and the only people that can actually see the unencrypted data are those individuals on your network that have permission to use those keys, which are locked down, and then only they can actually see the unencrypted data, but the entire stream is already encrypted end to end. So if that hacker was able to somehow steal your database, it's already encrypted. If somehow they were able to jump in the middle of your transaction stream and skim off transactions, it's already encrypted and protected. So that's awesome. It's protected through all phases of the transaction, and it's not difficult to implement into your application. So they try to make it easy to plug in, easy to implement, and it's definitely much safer now. So that's the already encrypted or the always encrypted piece that's in SQL 2016. All right. They also have implemented row-level security in SQL Server. So, which is another thing. You can lock down things now, even at the row level, not just the tables or not just the columns, but individual rows you can have protected now. All right. On top of that, we actually have dynamic data masking. So what's data masking? I can just tell you briefly. Still going back to the credit card window, you know how you put in the credit card information and maybe the first 12 numbers or whatever they are, they're hashed out and only a portion of it's visible. That's data masking. The masking that's normally done in applications require custom development. That's just the way it's always been up till now. So you required custom development, custom work. Now SQL Server can do dynamic data masking to where you can configure it and then your applications can just use it. So and what's also good about that too is you can determine which fields are masked and how the masking is going to occur, but it can actually make it to where if you need to have that SQL developer actually query and work on your production environment, you can configure the data masking and they won't be violating any of your compliance regulations. It's something that can automatically be masked and you don't have to worry about revealing the data and violating any of these compliance things. And it's easy to plug into your application. So it doesn't require a lot of custom development to be able to use. It's just a feature that you can implement, turn on, and utilize, and make it to where individuals that need to access your data can access your data without you violating things. Alrighty, fourth point, we have easier upgrades now by using the Data Migration Assistant. Okay, so we'll get into a little bit more detail on this coming up in another couple slides, but in the past we had the Upgrade Advisor that was good for SQL 2012 and 2014. Now they have a beefed up version called the Data Migration Assistant, and what's nice about this tool is that it actually can help you do upgrades and migrations, not just give you warnings or suggestions like, oh, you need to update your .NET version. You know, so the Upgrade Advisor would give you warnings and alerts that, hey, you're going to have a problem because of X. Yes, you'll still get warnings alerts with Data Migration Assistant, but it will actually help you do the migrations for you, and it'll help you even migrate logins and things. So we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail coming up in the presentation. All right. All right, now you have to make a decision, choosing the right version of SQL Server. So which version are you going to choose? Last week, they actually just released 2017. We've got some links included on some of the new features in 2017. You might want to take a look at that. What I usually do as a rule of thumb, when a new product comes out, usually most of the customers I deal with, you want to wait until probably the first service pack's released. After they've stabilized it, it's a good time to start thinking about it, but if you're thinking about 2017, you wait until everything's stabilized, probably Service Pack 1. But I'm going to talk a little bit more about 2016, 2014, and 2012 right now. I've included a link here at the very top here so you actually compare all the different versions, 2012, 2014, and 2016, but I've actually listed some of the things of the features that are included in 2016 that are not included in that comparison that Microsoft offers, okay? So I talked briefly about the always encrypted data. If you want that feature, it's definitely only available in 2016. What's nice about it also is not only does it work in the 2016 database, it also works in the cloud. It works with Azure. So that's a nice new feature, and it's available in 2016. I'm sure it's there in 2017 also, but we're talking basically about 2016 right now. The dynamic data masking that we mentioned briefly last slide, that's also a 2016 feature, not available in 2014 or 2012. This one is cool. I don't know how many, like I said, I've talked about all the different installs I've done with SQL Server or updates. Now they finally made it to where you can configure your TempDB during the installation wizard instead of having to do it afterwards. I don't know how many installs I've done where as soon as the install is complete, you got to go straight in, look at how many processors you have, try to figure out how many data files you need for TempDB, and then manually change it, configure it, stop and start your SQL Server, just another step to do. Now you can actually configure it during the wizard, during the install, with the regular configurations, and put the amount of TempDB files and the proper size that you need from the very start. So thank you, Microsoft, for doing that. It definitely will take one more step off our plates, and it's about time, I think, they actually added that to the configuration. Next point, Polybase. Now we have Polybase support inside SQL. So what does that mean? It means that you can actually use T-SQL to query your Hadoop and like your SQL Azure blob storage using regular SQL queries with regular relational joins. So how do you do that? After you have your SQL Server installed, you install Polybase. And after you have Polybase installed, it's just a simple spconfigure command. So it becomes a SQL configuration. You enable it inside SQL Server, reconfigure with override, and then after that point, you're able to actually just do regular joins to your Hadoop and SQL Azure blob data using SQL and the relational data that's provided. So Polybase support built into SQL Server now. JSON support. So what is JSON? It stands for JavaScript Object Notation. But what it really is, it's a programming language that your web developers and your mobile web developers know all about. It's good for them putting objects in and out of the database. So what I can mostly relate that to is back when XML was just added as a feature inside SQL Server, where you can actually export data as XML, take XML and easily interpret it back into SQL Server, and even the data types inside can easily store XML. Similar to that, now you can do the same thing with JSON, and your web developers and mobile developers will definitely want to be able to take advantage of that. Another 2016 feature. Okay, Query Store. What is Query Store? So this will help you. This is it actually saves your historical query plans. So what does that mean? Think about this. How many of you have had this issue? So you've had a stable SQL Server for a very long time. You haven't done any updates to it. It's just sat there, run steady, done regular normal growth, worked fine. There's queries that worked perfectly last week, but then now all of a sudden, maybe someone's reporting, hey, when I click on X page, or more specifically, when I run specific query here, it's slow, and I don't know why. It was quick last week, and you know that nothing has changed as far as code or procedures. What do you do? Well, the way it's always been, yes, you can actually open and get the current execution plan and try to figure out why is it slow right now. But in 2016, you actually have what's called the Query Store, and you can actually save your historical query plans, and then you can go back and figure out at what point in time did something change. So there's three types of stores built into the Query Store. So first of all, you have a plan store, which actually keeps all of your execution plan information, and then you have your runtime stats store, which keep all of your execution statistics information, and then last but not least, you have your weights stats store, which means that maybe something has changed. Maybe it wasn't, maybe a specific table grew, which caused your query plan to change. Maybe something else changed in your environment, and now you're waiting for reasons that you didn't realize before, and the weight types have changed for these specific queries. So three different methods for the Query Store that you can really do some deep digging and troubleshooting to try to figure out what changed in the environment to cause your stuff to slow down, and definitely will benefit your troubleshooting. I also mentioned briefly under the previous tab with the increased data security and increased encryption, row-level security has been introduced in SQL 2016. Big benefits. Stretch database. So you want to know, what is stretch database? Do you have one of those large databases that maybe you wished that you could take advantage of the cloud now? Everybody talks about the cloud, wishing I could move some of my data to the cloud. Maybe you have that large database that you wish, if I could just take some of my older data, maybe all the stuff that's not actively queried, the stuff that's maybe older than 3 months, put that up in the cloud where I could take advantage of that and only have my active data down here, but I don't really want to have to recode everything or write new procedures or write new application and to be able to do that. It kind of like partitioning. You know, if I could just partition the older data to be up in the cloud and keep my fresh data here current with me, that's what I would love to do. Well, you just basically described Stretch Database. You can implement the Stretch Database in the Azure cloud and put in points that you would like for it to reference, and then everything beyond that point gets pushed up to the cloud, and you don't have to change your queries. You don't have to change your application. It just works. And so that's a new feature that's inside 2016 that can let you take advantage of the cloud and basically partition your data without using an actual partition now. Last but not least on this slide, temporal table. So what's a temporal table? It's kind of like having to do a table audit or doing a SQL audit without having to implement triggers. And it's not the same thing as change data capture. So temporal table, you can actually set that up and you can actually query from it and figure out at a point in time what was my table data like. So you know that something changed. It's actually audited, and you can actually tell that these different fields have changed, but you want to know, maybe there was lots of changes, and you want to know, what was my data in this table like yesterday at 12:30 p.m.? You can do that with temporal table now. You can query back almost to a point in time, and it'll tell you this is exactly the way your data was in this table at this point in time. Neat feature, awesome. That's available in SQL 2016, not in 2012 or 2014. All right. So that's choosing which version of SQL Server, and yes, I'm definitely sold on 2016, but let's go to the next slide. Which edition of SQL Server do we need to choose? So do we need to pick SQL Standard or SQL Enterprise Edition, or maybe am I going to get by with one of the Express or Light type editions? Okay, so what I've put together here, yes, there's a link. You can actually see here what is available and the different editions of SQL Server. But I try to put a little bit of a nutshell here. If you need any of these features that I have listed here, then that means you definitely need Enterprise Edition, not just Standard Edition. So if you need any of the advanced high availability pieces inside SQL Server, such as always on or clustering, well, then you have to have Enterprise Edition. If your server needs more than 24 cores, or maybe it needs more than 128 gigabytes of memory because you have so much crunching to do, well, that will require Enterprise Edition. If you need TDE, the transparent data encryption, some of the higher levels of encryption with SQL Server, that's part of Enterprise Edition, so that's what you'll need. If you need any of those advanced BI features that I gave you on the benefits tab of the presentation, like the in-memory column store, any of those advanced BI pieces, that will require Enterprise Edition also. So next slide, I want to talk about now. Let's see here. The Upgrade Advisor in SQL 2012 and 2014. The upgrade, we talked about this briefly also, but the Upgrade Advisor was the tool that's available in the 2012 and 2014 software when you're getting ready to do an upgrade in your environment, and it would actually tell you some, give you advice on your upgrade or give you warnings on your upgrade. I mentioned briefly like you need to update your .NET. Things like that is what the Upgrade Advisor would do for you. So the downfalls were, of course, if you needed to install on 2012, you could only use the 2012 Upgrade Advisor. If you needed to install on 2014, you could only use the 2014 Upgrade Advisor. Also, It was only available for something that